Let's get back to the madness in Minneapolis. We now have churches falling victim to this lawless insurrection. Protesters stormed a city's church service after claiming one of the pastors there is an ICE agent. Don Lemon was with the protesters, naturally. Let's listen to his report.
Have gathered over here. They're in the middle of the church. In the beginning of the church service, the pastor was speaking, and Nakima stood up and said her piece, and then the protesters surrounded her. But this is a clandestine mission. I think they found out one of, according to them, this is according to Operation Pull-Up, that one of the pastors here is a member of ICE. And so here we go.
You could talk to the lead pastor.
Yeah.
Joining me now is president of the Center of the American Experiment and writer for the popular Powerline blog, John Hinderaker. John, we're now storming a church service, frightening parishioners, surrounding the pastor. What in God's name is happening in your state?
Rita, what is going on in Minnesota is an insurrection, a rebellion against federal authority. We haven't seen anything like it in the United States since 1861, when the Confederate States seceded. This insurrection is being incited by Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota, and Jacob Frey, the mayor of Minneapolis. And it has now spiraled out of control, in part because local police are being held back and are not maintaining order. Invading a church on a Sunday morning, it's an absolute outrage. These so-called protesters are, at a minimum, trespassing. And if they each spent a week in the county jail, these disruptions would stop immediately. But that isn't happening. And the protests keep getting more and more disruptive. The Democrats are at war against the Trump administration. And that's the basic reality. Anything the administration tries to do, the Democrats resist with all their might. And these liberals do not want federal immigration law to be enforced. And it's terrible, Rita, because these ICE agents are picking up murderers, multiple murderers, child rapists, criminals of all sorts. And of course, they're all illegal aliens to boot, which is a crime in itself. And the Democrats simply don't want these laws to be enforced. And this is their way of making war on the Trump administration.
John, you talked about some of these violent offenders who are being rounded up, and I want to play you this clip from an officer who has had enough with these protesters. Listen to this.
So you're reporting, we're here to arrest a child sex offender, and you guys are out here honking.
Oh, we're not. No, we're pressed. No, we're not.
That vehicle right there is honking and impeding our investigations while we're trying to arrest a child sex offender. That's who you guys are protecting. Insane.
John, it is insane because we are having murderers deported, child sex offenders, rapists, and yet these protesters are doing everything within their power to try to obstruct.
That's a key point, Rita. They aren't really protesting. What they're doing is interfering with these ICE agents who are trying to enforce federal law. That is a federal crime. You cannot impede and interfere with law enforcement. They'll do things like they'll park their vehicles perpendicular across the street. So they'll try to trap ICE agents in a particular place so they can't get out and go about their law enforcement duties. They harass them in a multitude of ways. And it's a crime, and yet they are not being punished.
And these protesters aren't just agitated about ICE and deportation. They're also upset about the focus that has been on the fraud in your state, the fraud perpetrated mainly by segments of the Somalian community. Tell me a little bit about that. Do we yet know the full scale of this fraud?
Well, Rita, we know some of it. The Feeding Our Future scandal is kind of the headline here. It has been for the last 4 years. In the Feeding Our Future scandal, so far, 78 people have been charged, 57 have been convicted. There have been a couple of trials as well as guilty pleas, and there are more charges pending. That's a $500 million theft. But the assistant U.S. attorney who has prosecuted those Feeding Our Future cases says that they've been investigating the $18 billion in Medicaid spending in Minnesota over the last few years. And he's concluded that at least one half of that $18 billion has been stolen by fraudsters. So we're probably looking at a fraud here of $10 billion or more.
Astonishing. And the next state that's going to have some scrutiny is going to be California. It'll be fascinating to see what's uncovered there. Your governor, the governor of Minnesota, Tim Walz, the man who could have been vice president, is going to step down. How culpable is he for the dysfunction in Minnesota?
Rita, he is highly culpable. He's absolutely responsible. He has actively encouraged resistance to federal authority. I call him the Jefferson Davis of the 21st century. He's threatened to call out the Minnesota National Guard to fight against ICE. And he mused in a press conference about being at war with the federal government. The man is an absolute disgrace, and he bears a lot of responsibility for what is going on now in Minneapolis.
You know what? He was a figure of mockery, really, throughout that presidential campaign. Tampon Tim, he was called, because he was putting tampons in boys' bathrooms across his state. But really, he is such a dangerous figure. And you think about that election 2024 now, and what would have happened if we did have a Kamala Harris, Tim Walz team in the White House today?
Rita, all we can say is we're all grateful that didn't happen. I mean, Walz was a laughing stock during that campaign, but I think in the time that's gone by since, more people have realized that he's not just a laughing stock, he's really a menace. And, he is not running for re-election. He had announced that he was running for re-election. He's now changed his mind, is going to step down at the end of this term. And obviously that's because of all of the turmoil that has been going on.
Now, you mentioned about the local police not maintaining order. That's something that has been noted by people who have been observing what's been happening in Minneapolis and elsewhere in Minnesota. We've had protesters just behave appallingly. Stephen Miller, the commentator, not the Trump administration, Stephen Miller, he points out that in recent days, we've seen these protest groups chase innocent men out of a diner, attack an innocent guy on the street who was actually with them. They harassed an innocent guy in an SUV, demanding that he show his ID. They blocked an innocent guy because his rental car plates, and they've now stormed a church service, as we played earlier. And he says, I haven't seen a single Minneapolis police officer in any of the video footage. How is that possible? What is happening there within the police force, and what orders are they receiving in terms of how to handle these protests?
Well, it's because Minneapolis is a sanctuary city. And what that means is, by law, the local police, don't cooperate with federal immigration authorities. And that's terrible, because ICE really needs local police to do crowd control and maintain order. That should not be ICE's job, but that's not happening here. And so these ICE agents are being continuously harassed and interfered with. And that is by design. Minneapolis is legally a sanctuary city, and that is intended to take the local police out of the action and make it impossible to enforce federal law.